You're watching The Citizen Report, real, in-depth American.
Welcome to The Citizen Report, everyone. I'm Jonathan Shannon, and thank you for joining me tonight. As always, this newscast is real, in-depth American. So, some breaking news. It's my understanding that a magnitude 7.6 earthquake has struck off the coast of the Cayman Islands. Information is still somewhat sort of trickling in, and it's kind of hard to put together sort of a fulsome report at the moment, but I did bring together some information pertaining to this situation. Obviously, anytime there's a major earthquake, anywhere, it's of significance, but even more so being that it's in the Caribbean Sea. In the Caribbean Sea, you have obviously, some little tremors here and there, but you hardly ever have a 7.6. Now, initially, it was, as I understand it was rated 8.0. It's been sort of adjusted as 7.6. Now, there's certain aspects I'm somewhat knowledgeable about, but I'm certainly not an expert on all matters of earthquakes. It's just I'm kind of self-taught on certain aspects of it, but definitely not all aspects of it. But I'll give it my best shot, if you will. I was actually getting ready to produce a recorded show to go up on Rumble, hopefully later tonight or tomorrow at the latest. But obviously this story broke, and I thought, well, I'll go ahead and jump on and talk about this at least for a few minutes' time. So, interestingly enough, as I start this broadcast, it doesn't really seem like many news outlets are efforting much of anything to cover this. In fact, one major channel I have it on isn't even doing news at the moment. It's kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is, though. So let's get to the most pertinent information, and this is going to be kind of an open-ended show. It's not going to be tightly packaged because this is live and it's still developing. So this occurred, as I said, off the coast of the Cayman Islands along the edge of the North American plate and the Caribbean plate. And I have a picture of the plates to show you in a moment's time. But this big circle you see here is where the 7.6 is estimated to have occurred, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. This is straight from their website, by the way. As I said, it was a 7.6 magnitude earthquake at a depth of 10 kilometers. That's, I believe, a little over 6 miles down, below the Earth's surface. So it's somewhat deep underwater, underground. But obviously, it is kind of, it certainly gets your attention seeing this. Now, that's the information I was just looking at. It was kind of covered up a second ago, but 10 kilometers depth, 7.6 magnitude, 209 kilometers south-southwest of Georgetown, Cayman Islands. Now, there have been some advisories that have been issued by U.S. authorities. Now, of course, it's officially up to each country to sort of issue, if you will, binding, evacuations, warnings, and the like. But the U.S. government will put out advisories even when it's not under U.S. jurisdiction that it's pertaining to. Now, some is and some aren't in this case, because you have the U.S. Virgin Islands. Let's see what else. You have, obviously, Puerto Rico, both of which are not states but are certainly under the U.S. Federal jurisdiction of sorts. So let's go to one of those advisories now. My apologies there. That was a sneak peek, I guess, at what I'm preparing for a different episode. Now, this is the advisory, the actual advisory. It's my understanding one of two have been issued. This was issued at basically 0024 UTC time, and that translates to, so right now it's 1:14 a.m. UTC. So that puts it, let me make sure I get back to the right one. There we go. So 0024 UTC. So that's almost coming up on an hour ago at this point. So again, just to repeat, magnitude 7.6, origin time 23:23 UTC. So that's coming up on almost 2 hours ago at this point in time. Depth of, and it's interesting, they've got a different measurement here. It's fascinating to me how different federal agencies will, for the same thing, have two different things to say about a matter. But looks like from, I believe this is going to be National Weather Service Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, Honolulu, Hawaii. They are saying that this is going to be a depth of 20 miles. So that's significantly deeper than, 6 or 7 miles, roughly speaking, under the surface of the Earth, basically. Now, I'm just kind of going through this in real time, but I know I'm getting to this part. Basically, they're giving you some estimated arrival times for tsunami conditions. So some of these times, actually most of these times have now passed. You have two areas of interest in Cuba, Santa Cruz, maybe de Sur or something like that, and then the other Nueva Gerona. Both are in Cuba. The first arrival time for these two respectively would be about 2:43 UTC. That's a little over an hour from now. And then 3:13 UTC, and you can do the math. So basically this situation's ongoing. Theoretically, these would have already had impact. I'm not seeing many reports at the moment of significant conditions. There is allegedly footage from, I believe, Honduras, which I believe might actually be the closest landmass to the center of where this earthquake is thought to have occurred. So I do have that footage. Let me go to that if I can. And, I'm having to rely on X, and X is very valuable for a lot of reasons, but sometimes you have to kind of wade through a lot of nonsense, a lot of mess to get to the meat of the matter. And actually, I apologize, I'm not seeing that footage. It must have quickly refreshed. I'm using the Cayman Islands as basically the keyword. I'm going to type in Honduras instead and see what comes up. So again, folks, this is kind of open-ended live right now. So in Honduras, there's significantly more information, and it's trickling in slowly, but we are getting information. So, and again, I'm going to say this again, like I did on my last live show. Since this is live, this is a breaking news story. Sometimes since I can't vet video as it's literally coming in to push back out, sometimes I can't guarantee, if you're going to hear something, I apologize ahead of time if it's, a bad word or something like that. And I can't always 100% verify the information. So just take it with a disclaimer. We're just looking at this as a food for thought kind of situation. So with that disclaimer, let me now go to this. This is allegedly footage from Honduras. I'm guessing it has to do with the earthquake aspect, maybe a swimming pool of some kind. Let's see what this has to show us. So I'm guessing that the movement of the earth from the earthquake was enough to cause the water to kind of spill out of the side a little bit of the swimming pool there. So again, just for illustration, this is what someone posted. So this is kind of the 7.6 zone. Obviously, and I do have a better map to show you actually. Let me go to that real quick. I believe it's this one. There we go. This is going to be this particular one's from U.S. Geological Survey, and they are showing and I'll just explain to you again, I don't pretend to know everything there is to know about anything, but including this subject. But one thing I would point out is that the movement, sort of like you have the inertia of, like the kinetic energy moving out from the center. So the way I understand it is, for example, earthquakes on the east coast of the United States. Again, this would be in this case, it's a water, underwater on the edge of a plate. But in the case of like an east coast earthquake, the reason why the earthquake can spread out much more easily is because basically there's less to stop it. Relatively speaking, there's less, for example, mountain ranges to slow down and sort of take the brunt of that energy. Whereas on the West Coast, it's more limited, right? Now, I don't pretend to know all there is to know about that, but basically that's just to say that sometimes you can look at this going out from the center. It can be kind of deceptive with respect to the actual impact, because East Coast, you can be hundreds and hundreds of miles and yet you feel it like you're almost at the center of it. Whereas on the West Coast, you could be at the same distance away from the center and not feel a thing at times. Like San Francisco, you might be there and there's an earthquake down in Los Angeles and you may not feel anything. Whereas if there's a earthquake in, well, let's take 2011, for example. I remember I was living in North Carolina at the time, and I was sitting in my house at this particular moment, and the earthquake occurred a whole other state away in Virginia, and not too far from Washington, D.C. I forget exactly where now, but way up there in Virginia. I felt the earthquake, and it was like, you immediately knew something was wrong, and it was not something you're used to feeling on the East Coast of the United States. But basically, that kind of gives you hopefully a little sense that sometimes the actual land or water can affect how far and how fast the earthquake can spread from the center. I believe it's called the S wave. I'm again, folks. I'm trying to draw on information I haven't brushed up on in some time. But let me go back to just quickly here. To this other advisory. And so basically this is when this was issued, this other advisory, and I should have mentioned there were two advisories by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, which is part of the National Weather Service, my understanding is. This was issued at 8:29 p.m. Atlantic time. So Atlantic time is 1 hour ahead of Eastern time. So that puts it 7:29 p.m. Eastern. So not quite an hour ago. Tsunami message number 3, we'll just say about roughly an hour ago, just short of that. Let me put this up on screen for you and go down a little ways. Let me show you what I was seeing here for just a second so you can take note of the time and jurisdiction and all. So basically, this is what they're saying. An earthquake with a preliminary magnitude of 7.6 occurred north of Honduras at 7:23, that's 6:23 p.m. Eastern today. Based on all available data, there is a tsunami threat to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands of sea level fluctuations and strong ocean currents that could be a hazard along coasts, beaches, in harbors, and in coastal waters. Now, I'll come back to that point in a second because there was one additional point about the spreading of the energy that I was intending to mention based on my personal understanding of how these things work. So Puerto Rico, they give you, starting with Puerto Rico on this advisory, a number of interests as well as the U.S. Virgin Islands areas of interest. So the very first one in this advisory mentions Mona Island at 9:46, that would be 8:46 Eastern time. So, I believe, I've never been there, but I'm assuming Puerto Rico is on Atlantic time, so this is for them local time, but since I'm in Eastern time, I'm going to go by Eastern time. So 8:46, that's about 20 minutes from now, we'll start to see impacts potentially, and this is not going to be much. According to this, it's going to be below a foot So in all these areas of interest, it's going to be below 1 foot. So this is definitely not going to be the Japan earthquake scenario where you had a massive wall of water. This is not going to be anything like that. So I don't want to get on here and, if you will, fearmonger. And there's no reason for that anyway, because it's just not enough, not enough anticipated. So in addition, on this one, different jurisdiction, but you do have the, I believe, British Virgin Islands. They are going to begin to see, I'm guessing, residual impacts around 1014 AST or 914. So basically, roughly about, we're going to be seeing in U.S. jurisdiction beginning in less than 30 minutes or just about 20 minutes from right now. And we're going to see a number of cities impacted. So I'll just run down through here. My apologies if I mispronounce some of these. So it looks like Mana Island, 946 Atlantic. Again, folks, I'm struggling to. This is definitely not. This is like a Spanish, Hispanic culture. So Arequipa at 947 AST, Mayaguez at 948, Aguadilla at 949 Atlantic. San Juan, that's a big one, at 950. San Juan is obviously the big city there in Puerto Rico, one of them at least. So Puenelas at 955 Atlantic, and Ponce at 958 AST. And I can just, keep going down through here, but I'll just list the locations at this point. So Mayaguez Island, I think that is, Yabucoa, Caja de Muertos. Sorry, folks. I'm trying to pronounce these, but I'm not good at pronouncing these names. So Vázquez Island, Fajardo, maybe, and Cueba Island. So again, I know I just completely botched probably 3/4 of these names, but anyways, you can see on your screen, obviously, what we're looking at here. U.S. Virgin Islands, maybe I'll have a better shot at these. Christiansted, Lime Tree, Lamshire Bay, Charlotte Amelia. And in British Virgin Islands, we have Anegada, Virgin Gorda, and Roadtown. So, and this is the other important thing to mention. According to this advisory, there have been no observations of tsunami activity as of yet. So, pretty important to mention that as well, because I know there's buoys in the Atlantic, the Gulf of, what is now Gulf of America. It's going to take some getting used to saying that, but let me go to that page, and I'm not even going to pretend to understand what I'm looking at here, but I'm going to put it up on screen anyway, since it is worthy to mention in this scenario. National Data Buoy Center. So, again, I think I was watching another YouTube channel, I believe it's called Agenda Free TV, and he was also saying he has no idea how to interpret this. So I'm the same way. I have no way of understanding this, but this is one buoy, looks like tsunami station in event mode within past 24 hours. So the one that's you see moving, or kind of sort of not blinking, but kind of gives you the feeling almost like it's blinking, getting bigger and smaller to get your attention. So I guess this is relevant to look at then, and you can see the ups and downs in the water level. There might be just a small bit, and that's I'm not even sure if I'd call it that. It looks like it's the different differentials between high and low is a little bit bigger, but it's not much at all. And in fact, if I just get rid of that, if I can, I can just tell you, if we're going off of, let's say, approximately somewhere close to this buoy, for whatever reason it's not showing any data, it's my understanding that, so if the energy of the wave is going to the northwest through what remains of the Caribbean Sea into, I guess that would be Yucatan Channel, and then finally up into Gulf of America, formerly Gulf of America, formerly Gulf of Mexico, it's going to take a lot of the energy out of it, whatever energy is there as you go to the northwest. Obviously, the Yucatan Peninsula there, Cuba, the main island, and then you have the smaller ones like Jamaica. But that's really in the other direction anyway. And then you're going to have the Cayman Islands here, and they're already reportedly past the peak threat point. So really, what we're looking at is twofold. We're looking at Puerto Rico out this way, and then what remains of Cuba that has not received impacts as of yet. So this is definitely still just a breaking story right now. There's not a lot of information to go on. And like I said earlier in the broadcast, I got it on one of the news channels, and they're not even doing news right now. It's like they basically they're asleep at the wheel. They're not even covering what is a major story right now. So I'm going to stay with you for just a little longer and see if any other information comes through. Let me put this up on screen so we can clarify what level we're at. This is my understanding of it, of what the U.S. government would classify this event. The way I understand it is this is not a warning but an advisory. So that's like one tier below worst case scenario. So alert level advisory, and it says stay out of the water and away from the shore. The hazard is strong currents and dangerous waves in or near coastal waters. And I guess they use the anticipated height of the waves as also a basis for what level they issue this at, but basically 1 to 3 feet or basically up to a meter. And the other thing I was going to mention is actually about tsunamis, how they work. Now, I'm not an expert. I'm just going to sort of relay a little bit of what I understand or tsunamis, how they actually work. So you might be wondering, for example, the boats out, on, out on sea, right? If they're up just like literally near the point of the tsunami, they might see a little bit of waves, but the reason why they're not going to see much of anything there is because there's enough energy below the water, if the depth is deep enough, I should say, out on the high seas. The energy is going to be low enough it can kind of it's definitely moving. It's a huge force of energy, but the amount of waves they're going to see is not going to be nearly as high, not nearly as significant as when you get to shore, because when you get to shore, the difference between sea level and the bottom of the sea is becoming gradually, usually it's gradual, sometimes it's rather sudden, but usually it's more gradual as you come up on the continental shelf. In this case, you don't encounter much of that in terms of, our perspective, mainland United States. You're not going to encounter much of that until you get to, just a few dozen miles, sometimes it can be 100 miles out from shore. But when you hit that point, that energy then pushes the water up. And that's why you get, like you see on TV and the movies and whatnot, you have this huge wall of water pushing up from sea level. And that's where you get those sort of that trademark tsunami wave. But out on the sea, you're not going to see much of any of that, usually. Now, if it's a biblical wave, that's a little different. If it's like Noah's flood, that's a little different. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, basically textbook example of what would happen in a scenario like this. So my expectation, based on what my personal understanding of tsunamis, how they work, is that we're not going to see the buoys make much movement on the high seas. You're going to see a little movement if there is something going on, but you're not going to see you're not going to see the buoys all of a sudden shoot up, 50 feet up or 30 feet up. It's going to take pretty much a worst case scenario tsunami. And even by the level of the advisories, being that it is an advisory, not a warning. That's why this is not going to be a worst case scenario. Still, though, it is definitely an earthquake, tsunami event, potential tsunami event, I should say, that it is definitely worth paying close enough attention to that. So I'm just going to hang with you guys for a few more minutes, make sure there isn't something else coming across the wires that I'm seeing. I'm not seeing anything new. Let me go back to the Pacific, or the tsunami.gov, I should say. Let me just double check where we're standing with them. So, okay, so U.S. Tsunami Warning System website, that's tsunami.gov, by the way. They still got a tsunami threat top banner on their page. So obviously we're still in this active situation north of Honduras. Depth of, man, it's crazy. I mean, what the difference is on this one. It's not even the magnitude, because we had a magnitude differential of about 0.4 between the initial and the revised one. But it's the depth that gets my attention, because 21 miles is significantly different than, well, not just the 20 miles, but then even before that you had, I believe it was, going off of kilometers to miles, it's about 6 point something miles. So it's like, it's kind of bizarre to me, the depth is reported so different across different sources and whatnot. So looks like there was a new message in the last few minutes. This is probably about 11 minutes ago, or, well, okay, so about 15 minutes ago. I'm just reading all this in real time, but you can read it as well, assuming it is on screen. I believe it is. Okay, so evaluation, tsunami waves have been observed. Okay, so we can now confirm, according to this at least, that we are seeing some form of tsunami conditions. Let me go down here to observation. So Isla Mujeres, Mexico, I believe that is. So, I mean, that's a very residual amount. That's like 0.1 foot. So it's not even that much. But obviously, the reason it is mentioned is because, one, it is the actual energy being pushed to shore. And two, you might see different conditions elsewhere. But this is, if you will, ground confirmation that there is a tsunami, officially a tsunami in play here right now. So I do want to see where this is being observed. I'm going to go by the coordinates, not the town, so I can get a more precise. Okay, so this is actually looks like the pointer is out at sea just slightly, but basically almost at Cancun. So they had an observed 0.1 foot tsunami, whatever that means. I don't know. I'm guessing that's a buoy out there or some kind of observation, but some way, somehow they're able to observe this. And so that's interesting. So we now have confirmation of a tsunami officially. Definitely not a Japan style 2011 style tsunami. Definitely not that, but so bear with me, folks. I'm just going to, as I said, I'm going to hang with you guys. I was planning to wrap up, but since there was a little bit of ground truth to this at this point, I want to continue to monitor this with you live for just a little bit longer and make sure there isn't something else I'm missing. And as I said, folks, I was planning to produce an episode this evening, and all of a sudden this story broke. So obviously this is a major story to cover. So 9:09 p.m. So that's Atlantic time. So tsunami advisory is now canceled For coastal areas, let me make sure I'm getting this right. Okay, update 9:09 p.m. Atlantic. That's some 30 minutes ago. Tsunami advisory is now canceled for Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands. Well, I covered it by saying that, but the U.S. Virgin Islands and the British Virgin Islands. So, and according to that report, there was just the one from basically Mexican jurisdiction at 0.1 feet of a tsunami. So it's measured with respect to the tidal levels. So let me put that up on screen for you and then go back up to the top because I don't think I had that up on screen when I was saying that. So again, tsunami message number 4, 9:09 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. Tsunami advisory is now canceled for Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and the British Virgin Islands. So they're making this evaluation, basically using all available data, in that such data indicates that a destructive tsunami for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands was not generated by this earthquake. So out of prudence, they did issue the initial advisory, but they're now canceling the advisory for those areas. So let me make sure I'm not missing something here. So going back to the other message here, this was the later message then at 1:21 UTC. I don't know why they can't use one time on these messages. But, you know, basically 20 minutes ago on this message, but the latest one, tsunami waves have been observed. Hazardous tsunami waves are forecast for some coasts. So basically, dangerous, hazardous tsunami waves are still in play for some zones. Initial sea level reading from Mexico shows a small wave. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center will continue to monitor sea level gauges in the region until it is confirmed that the threat has passed. So what is not clear to me... Okay, I guess this says it then. So Cuba, Honduras, Cayman Islands. So yeah, Honduras and Cuba. Which by the way, makes sense. I'll say that because... Let me come back up on screen while I do something quickly here. But if you just look at the geography... You can actually, you can even just kind of reason this out, why they would still say there's a threat for Cuba, and I believe, what did it say, Cayman Islands? I believe it did. But not for Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico is due east. Like, you have to go basically through Haiti, Dominican Republic, that island. And then you could also mention Jamaica even in front of that pretty much. Although it's really more of Haiti and Dominican Republic that would sort of help to break up more of that energy. At least for, I guess, most of the western coast of Puerto Rico would be maybe partially shielded at least. But let me just put that up on screen and so we can kind of just look at this together. But let me go... Let me come back up on screen one more time, because what I want to do actually is basically put the pin in the spot where it's estimated we had that earthquake. So we did have a 4.2 about 25 minutes ago approximately, somewhere kind of close to that same zone, I think. I'm looking at it now. Let me put this back up. Okay, there we go. So USGS 4.2. So that's to be expected too. It's very typical, especially of earthquakes of this magnitude, to see aftershocks. Ignore all the other ones you see here. Just focus on this one. I guess these two. So 4.8 and 4.2. So this just just marginally west of the point where the big one occurred. But I don't think a 4 point something is going to mean a whole lot for a tsunami threat at this point. But what I want to do, though, because I'm not the biggest fan of this map, although you can kind of make out quite a bit from this, I prefer the contrast to Google Maps personally. So, okay, so zooming back out here, so you do have Cayman Islands to the northeast, Jamaica sort of east-northeast, and then you have, so yes, going off of this, basically Jamaica, if anything went eastbound, it would have taken the brunt. Haiti, would have already been mostly shielded from it. But yeah, by the time you get to Puerto Rico, it's really maybe the southwest coast of Puerto Rico would be under some risk, but they've canceled, as I understand, the advisory for Puerto Rico. So Cuba and I believe Honduras, or excuse me, Cayman Islands and Cuba are the two that are still under some sort of advisory at this moment. So it's a lot of kind of a messy data to go through. So I wish there was a better way to do it, but it kind of gives you a sense that, this is definitely, like I said, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. This is something to watch, but it's not going to be a 2011 Japan earthquake tsunami scenario. And just to be abundantly clear, mainland United States pretty much under no threat at all. I mean, it's just not, the threat is just not there. You just have a small opening really between the Yucatan Peninsula and the west coast, the western end of Cuba. If there was to be anything, it would have had to basically come up through there to have any chance of impact at the, Gulf Coast of the mainland United States. But there's not, I didn't even see a mention of that directly on the advisories. So, you can make that what you will, but it's obviously a serious situation. If you're in, Cayman Islands, which I believe is a British overseas territory, and then of course Cuba. So if you're in one of those two areas, it is still a significant event potentially ongoing. Now, from what can be sort of understood at this moment, it doesn't seem like, to me, like this is going to be a major tsunami. Again, I don't want to count the eggs before they hatch, if you will, but it doesn't seem like the tsunami is going to be that big of a deal at this point. So, with that said, let me refresh the page one more time and make sure we're not missing something, and then I might close this out. So, let me pull up, I'm going to the map on tsunami.gov and see what they're talking about. Again, it's kind of messy. It's a lot of visual data. It's kind of hard to produce it, package it in a tight fashion. So I guess I can put this up on screen. So the point of impact, the point where this earthquake occurred, again, very deep underwater, underground, 21 miles depth. That's a very deep earthquake. Still, though, it kind of gives you an idea of how strong the earthquake was to produce any threat of a tsunami for it to be at 21, because you do have the 7.6 factor. It's just a big, strong earthquake. So Cayman Islands up to 1 meter, 1 to 3 for Cuba. So there is that information. I wish there was a better way to present this, but unfortunately not. So if you've been tuning in, if you're just tuning in, this is live coverage on the Citizen Report of a massive earthquake in the Caribbean Sea, and as well as a threat for tsunami in some interests, especially in the Caribbean, but as well as the U.S. Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and the U.S. territory of the U.S. Virgin Islands. So basically, just to sort of summarize everything before I kind of end this live broadcast, there is no threat to the United States, especially the mainland. There is no threat. the way I understand it, there is no threat. There is a residual threat remaining for Cuba and the Cayman Islands. I'm kind of surprised they're not mentioning things like Honduras. Honduras seems to have had significant impacts from the earthquake side of things. And in fact, before I wrap up, I am going to just check on my end to see if there's anything else coming out of Honduras. And that does seem to be the focal point from the earthquake side of things. So let me just check this. I wish I was, like I said before, I wish I could be do this more tightly packaged, but it's kind of hard to do that when you're in a live breaking news sort of situation. So all tsunami, and this is from Raw's alerts on X, all tsunami alerts have been canceled except for Cuba. So yes. Well, this is, okay, actually no, this is outdated because I do know Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands have been dropped from the tsunami advisory, so that would be outdated information. But obviously it's a diminishing threat, but not a zero threat at this point. So I'm just checking here before I wrap up. Okay, so a lot of redundant information, a lot of repeat information. Okay, so I might just share this potentially. So it looks like allegedly, I stress that word, this might be a tape, some footage of the earthquake itself. Let me take it full and see what it shows us. So a little shaking, but obviously not too much there. Okay, so scrolling down here a little bit more. I'm going to come back up on screen because you never know sometimes what you might come across, so I want to be cautious of that as well. A lot of repeat information, 7.6. We already know that. Okay, so this is actually the footage that I wanted to show a little earlier. Again, sorry. that's for a different episode. I'm getting ready to produce as soon as I come off the air here. Sorry about that. It's live TV after all. So, okay, so this is I guess the impacts, again, allegedly here. Don't know if this is actually legitimate, but just taking at face value, if this is what it's claiming to be, this could be what the coast was seeing, and you're just seeing a little bit splashing up over the edge of the shore. Let me see if there's any sound of this.
Muy pocos se resisten a hacer caso a algunas recomendaciones.
I have no idea what he's saying because I don't know Spanish very well. So. Could be Honduras where this is from. Could be. Okay, so I mean it's not even high enough where people aren't like fully backing up away from the shore, which is, I will say, that is very dangerous to be doing that. Hopefully they're actually made aware of the threat, because if there's even the mention of tsunami, you want to be getting as far away from the coast as possible. That's why you have places like Oregon and places like that. They've actually built hardened facilities where people can evacuate up above the water, anticipated, how far up the water would rise, because it is just that dangerous. So that is purportedly from Honduras tonight. So let's see what else is going on. So this was earlier tonight, just for documentary sake. Why not? Let me put this up on screen. Okay. So this is allegedly from Puerto Rico earlier. Again, I'm going to stress again that the tsunami advisory has been dropped. And anyone saying this was a tsunami warning, that's inaccurate, because I've already explained advisories are issued when it's not doesn't rise quite to the level of a warning. Basically, it's the anticipated height of the tsunami. When it's below a certain threshold, it's only an advisory. Okay, so purportedly from Puerto Rico here. And that's good to know that Puerto Rico does have a tsunami warning system like that, because, I just don't have any idea if they do or not. I'm glad that they do, because what is it? Hurricane, I'm trying to remember what the name was. I don't know if it was Irma or some other storm from 2017 thereabout. It devastated that island quite a bit, so it's good that the infrastructure is in place enough to actually have sirens going off when they need to go off. So, there's a lot of other information that I can't validate. Some are mentioning certain things about Cayman Islands and certain news events, and I won't get into that right now, but maybe I'll take a look at that later and decide whether that's worthy enough to report on. But okay, so let me go to this clip, maybe. Okay. So this gives you a sense of scale once again, which I kind of like to do that when possible. So, you kind of have the outer fringes of the zone that's impacted, and it goes no further past, and this is the earthquake side of things, it goes no further past Miami-Fort Lauderdale zone. But obviously, the immediate impacts are only going to be basically no further north than Cuba. So again, that's not tsunami, that's an earthquake sort of measurement. The sort of the anticipated outer edges of impact of the earthquake. And it's going to be, as I explained, it's going to be different based on land masses and where you are in relation to it. If you're on the west coast of the United States, it has a tendency to absorb more faster than on the East Coast, because the East Coast, the way the terrain, the way the geography is on the East Coast, like whether it's the New Madrid zone and the Mississippi River area, it's going to spread out much faster, and it's going to hold its strength further out than something, say, on the West Coast. So, it's not one size fits all when you see these cones, or not cones, but like the circles and the anticipated impacts as you go further out. It's sometimes, like I said, it's definitely not a one size fits all situation. So let me just keep checking here. I keep thinking I'm about to wrap up, and then something else comes through. So this is allegedly from the Cayman Islands, and this is definitely something I want to take note of, because this was one of the closest areas to the impact area of the earthquake. So, okay, let's take this full and see what this clip has to show us. Let me see if I can get the highest resolution possible. There we go. And let's see what happened here. Okay, so modern shaking, it looks like inside of a grocery store. Some things coming off the shelves, but definitely not everything. So, and people are just kind of standing around thinking, okay, we got an earthquake. They're definitely not running out of the building. At least in this case, that's kind of interesting to see that. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's just, like I said, just moderate shaking, and really not past that, at least in that particular case and location. So yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up here, because I'm pretty much I've exhausted any known information, sources of information, and I'll keep an eye on it. And like I said, I was getting ready to produce a recorded episode to go up on Rumble a little bit later tonight. So be looking for that. At this time, it's 8:59 p.m. Eastern time. So I don't know if it'll be up tonight, maybe. If not tonight, certainly by tomorrow. And I've been doing some digging on a certain matter that's not getting national attention as much as it should be, and I think it's actually relevant to the issue of freedom of the press that needs to be noted more, especially by independent media outlets. So I want to just give a small teaser to that. So go to my Rumble channel, The Citizen Report on Rumble. And let me just quickly, I'm just going to do a quick teaser before I wrap up. And that way you can see where to go for this because yeah, that's where the episode's going to be at. So The Citizen Report on Rumble is where you should go. Rumble.com, keyword search The Citizen Report. So I'll be taping that episode pretty shortly, hopefully very shortly, after I get off the air here on YouTube. So that's it for me, folks, and thanks for bearing with me in this breaking news coverage tonight on the situation in the Caribbean Sea. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can reach out on, putting a comment down below, and I'll make sure to see that. Or, just find me on social media. It's not hard to find me, Jonathan Shannon, on social media. It's definitely not hard to locate if you so wish. So that's it for me, folks, and God bless each and every one of you. And I hope to see you again very soon on the Citizen Report. From me, have a good night, and see you next time.